On a single night in August 1961, while Berlin slept, soldiers unrolled miles of barbed wire through the center of the city. Most history books treat this moment as a footnote, a simple barrier marking the boundary between East and West. But look at the physical reality of this trench. This was a barrier built by a superpower to hide a truth. It was the first visible sign that the communist experiment was failing, and its leaders were willing to physically lock their own people inside to keep that failure a secret. To understand why this wall rose, we have to look at the conflict that built it. A war without a declaration, without a front line, and without an end date. This conflict has its origins in 1917, during the First World War. Germany, desperate to knock Russia out of the fight, smuggled a radical revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin back into his home country on a sealed train. The gamble worked. Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power, Russia collapsed into revolution, and a new government took root, one built on an ideology that declared capitalism an enemy of the human race. When Lenin died in 1924, Joseph Stalin seized control. He transformed the Soviet Union into a heavy industrial powerhouse, but the cost was millions of lives lost to forced labor, political purges, and state-engineered famines. By 1945, the alliance defeating Nazi Germany fractured. Stalin refused free elections in occupied territories, instead installing loyal communist governments in Poland, Hungary, and East Germany. This line formed what Churchill called an Iron Curtain. Behind it, Eastern Europe was no longer free. With their common enemy gone, the two superpowers were left with two incompatible worldviews, staring each other down across a divided continent. The United States countered this expansion with the Marshall Plan, pouring $12 billion into Western Europe to rebuild its shattered economies and tie its future to American markets. Stalin responded by creating Comecon, a closed economic organization that bound the Eastern Bloc nations to the Soviet economy, ensuring they could not drift toward the West. Look at Berlin. Split between East and West, the capital sat deep inside Soviet territory, a Western outpost surrounded by a communist zone. In June 1948, Stalin blockaded all land and water routes into West Berlin, cutting off supplies to 2 million people. For 318 days, Western aircraft flew over 200,000 missions, landing every 90 seconds to deliver everything from coal to candy. Stalin's blockade failed, and he lifted it in May 1949. But the tension did not fade. Months later, the Soviet Union successfully tested its own atomic bomb. The American nuclear monopoly was over, and the stakes of every future confrontation became unimaginably higher. Communism was now spreading globally. In 1949, Mao Zedong won a brutal civil war in China, and by 1950, Soviet-backed North Korean forces invaded South Korea, triggering a 3-year war that ended in a stalemate. After Stalin's death, Nikita Khrushchev emerged as the new Soviet leader. He promised de-Stalinization, a more humane government, and a better life for Soviet citizens. The reality remained brutal. When Hungary attempted to break free from communist control in 1956, Khrushchev sentenced Soviet tanks to massacre the resistance and bring the nation back in line. In the United States, the fear of espionage ignited the Red Scare. Suspicion grew even more intense in 1960 when the Soviets shot down an American U-2 spy plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers. Then the battle moved to space. The Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, in 1957. Less than 4 years later, Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. To the West, this was more than a scientific achievement. If Soviet rockets could reach space, they could now drop nuclear warheads on any city on the planet. By 1961, the contrast between the two systems was impossible to ignore. Western Europe was prospering under the Marshall Plan, while the Eastern Bloc struggled to maintain even a basic standard of living. This disparity caused a catastrophic brain drain. Between 1949 and 1961, more than 3 million engineers, doctors, and skilled workers abandoned the East by simply walking into West Berlin. The East German economy was bleeding out. The Berlin Wall was Khrushchev's solution to this economic hemorrhage. He built a concrete cage to stop his workforce from escaping to the booming free markets of the West. Weeks after the wall rose, the tension peaked here at Checkpoint Charlie. For 16 hours, American and Soviet tanks faced each other at point-blank range. The soldiers inside did not know if they would be ordered to fire. The weight of the entire Cold War, every ideology and every nuclear stockpile, rested on the decisions of those crews. Only a secret back-channel agreement allowed both sides to retreat. It established the Cold War's ultimate rule. Because of mutually assured destruction, total war was no longer an option. The conflict became a war of endurance. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years as proof that one side was already cracking under its own weight. Today, the alliances and technologies created by this struggle still define our world. The Cold War never fully ended, it simply changed form.